As soon as I stepped inside, I was startled to find 3 other people scattered around the chamber. The space was dimly lit by flickering sconces on the stone walls, casting dancing shadows over rows of shelves that looked very ancient to me. And those mysterious trinkets dangling on one corner, which seemed to be out of place, were giving me an awkward vibe. Their faces didn't look familiar, but I was struck by an inexplicable connection to each of them, like fragmented memories trying to surface. I wanted to ask the obvious: who they were, and what they were doing here, but something about the atmosphere kept me quiet. So I just kept my peace to myself. Then my eyes roamed the enormous room. And at the far end, near a grand desk illuminated by a soft glow, I saw Mr. Sinclair. His tall, imposing figure seemed even more enigmatic in this setting. His sharp, discerning gaze met mine as soon as I entered, and a knowing smile crept onto his weathered face. It was as if he had been waiting for me here since our interaction earlier. Beside him was another familiar face, Archie. He stood with his arms crossed. His usual calm yet observant demeanor was in place. Then his gaze briefly met mine, but his arched eyebrow and the coolness in his eyes were hard to miss, and almost immediately, I felt a sudden jolt of unease gnawing at me. It was clear he wasn't thrilled with my presence for reasons I couldn't quite grasp. Although we're hardly acquainted with each other, but I never expected such a quashed greeting from him. The coldness in his gaze stung more than I cared to admit. I wasn't sure why his reaction bothered me so much, but it did, as there was an unspoken tension brewing between us, thickening the air around me. I swallowed hard, trying to shake off the growing unease as I shifted my attention back to Mr. Sinclair. I caught him and shrugged his shoulders with his lips pursed as I returned my focus to him. He might have noticed the awkward tension between me and Archie, and for some bizarre reason, I felt like he'd already expected it. "Go on," I heard Eliza speak behind me, so I tilted my head slightly, acknowledging her command without mouthing a word. Then I started moving my feet. I could feel multiple pairs of eyes watching me as I sauntered in Mr. Sinclair's direction. I wanted to say something to ease the rigidness overtaking me, but my mouth wouldn't open to say even a single word. I could feel the weight of every step as I walked toward Mr. Sinclair, the silence in the room amplifying the subtle tension. The air was thick with expectation, though I couldn't quite grasp what I was walking into. I felt like an intruder in a world I didn't yet understand. My thoughts swirled with questions, but none seemed appropriate to ask at the moment. Mr. Sinclair's smile remained, a mixture of reassurance and mystery. As I neared him, he gestured toward a chair near the grand desk. "Please, Mallorie. Take a seat," he said, his voice low but steady. I glanced at Archie once more, hoping for a change in his expression, but he remained as cold and distant as ever. I took my seat, trying to settle the unease brewing within me. My fingers nervously traced the edge of the desk as I sat, waiting for something, anything, to break the tension. After what seemed to be forever, Mr. Sinclair spoke again, his tone taking on a more serious edge. "I know you have questions, and they will be answered in due time. What you're about to learn is not something to be taken lightly." The room seemed to hold its breath at his words, and I could feel the weight of their meaning, even if I didn't fully understand it yet. My heart pounded in my chest, but I managed to keep my voice steady as I asked, "What exactly am I here to learn?" Mr. Sinclair's eyes locked onto mine, and for the briefest moment, I thought I saw something flicker behind them, a depth of knowledge, perhaps, or a secret he wasn't ready to share. "The Midnight Library is not merely a repository of books," he began. "It's a gateway, a bridge between worlds and knowledge that has long been forgotten or hidden. And you, Mallorie, are now part of that legacy." My stomach nodded at his words, the gravity of the situation sinking in. There were a lot of things going on in my head at this very second, but none of them seemed to make sense aside from one thing. I wasn't just here to work or learn about books or history. I was here because there was something far greater at play. The realization hit me as Mr. Sinclair's words hung in the air, heavy and foreboding. A gateway? A legacy? The implications were too vast, too surreal for me to grasp immediately. I opened my mouth to respond, but no words came. Instead, I stared at Mr. Sinclair, waiting for more, hoping that what followed would ground me in something I could understand. Archie shifted where he stood, the subtle movement drawing my attention. He uncrossed his arms, his fingers twitching slightly as if resisting the urge to interrupt. His eyes met mine again, and this time there was something more in his gaze. Skepticism, yes, but also curiosity. It was fleeting, gone before I could be sure, and replaced once more by that icy exterior. Mr. Sinclair leaned forward, resting his elbows on the desk. This chamber, this library, and the people in this room, we are bound by a singular purpose. To guard the knowledge that has the power to reshape worlds. The others in the room finally looked up from their tasks, their attention turning to Mr. Sinclair. The man with the eye patch, the woman with the glowing artifact, and the young guy who looked like an alchemist holding a vial, all seemed to be waiting for his next words as if this moment mattered just as much to them as it did to me. I brought you here because you have a role to play in this, Mallorie, Mr. Sinclair continued. One only you can fulfill. My heart skipped a beat. Why me? I asked, the words spilling out before I could stop them. I don't understand any of this. I'm just an ordinary girl. A ghost of a smile touched Mr. Sinclair's lips, though it didn't reach his eyes. Ordinary? Perhaps you've believed that about yourself. But this library doesn't choose just anyone. It reaches out to those who are needed and who belong. Again, the weight of his words pressed down on me, and I shook my head, feeling overwhelmed. This doesn't make sense, I murmured. I've never been here before. I'd never even heard of this place until you reached out to me yesterday and offered me a job I couldn't decline. Mr. Sinclair's gaze softened, though the intensity behind it never wavered. He leaned back slightly, steepling his fingers as he studied me. That's the beauty of the Midnight Library, Mallorie, he said, his voice calm yet laced with something deeper. It finds you, even when you don't know you're looking for it. And more importantly, it knows when the time is right. His words sent a chill through me, the kind that burrowed deep and refused to leave. My grip on the edge of the chair tightened, my knuckles white. So, what now? I asked, my voice barely audible. What exactly is my role in all of this? Archie let out a small, almost inaudible scoff, drawing my attention. He was leaning against the edge of the desk now, his arms crossed again, but there was a flicker of something new in his expression. Frustration? Amusement? I couldn't tell. She's not ready, he said flatly, his tone sounded dismissive. My chest tightened, heat rising to my face at his blunt remark. Before I could say anything, Mr. Sinclair cut in smoothly. None of us were, at first, he replied, there was a touch of sternness in his tone as he looked at Archie. Readiness is not the point. Willingness is. Archie huffed but said nothing more, his gaze flicking away from me. Mr. Sinclair turned back to me, his features softening again. Your role will reveal itself in time, he said, his voice steady and reassuring. But first, you must learn the rules of this place. They are not mere guidelines, Mallorie. They are your lifeline. Because without them, the library's secrets will consume you. The room suddenly seemed to grow quieter at his words. The air felt heavier with the weight of what he was saying. Then the others were all watching me now, their expressions unreadable. It was as if they were silently assessing whether I belonged here. And what are these rules? I asked, forcing the words past the lump in my throat. Mr. Sinclair gestured to Eliza, who had remained silent by my side. Eliza will guide you through them, he said. She knows this place as well as anyone. Eliza stepped forward, her warm smile returning, though there was a gravity in her eyes now. Come with me, young lady, she said gently. We'll start with the basics. I hesitated, glancing back at Mr. Sinclair. His expression was calm, yet expectant, as though daring me to take this next step. I felt a knot of uncertainty twist in my stomach, but I nodded and rose from the chair. As I followed Eliza toward another part of the chamber, I could feel Archie's gaze lingering on me, sharp and unrelenting. Whatever it was awaiting me, I could only hope I was ready to face it.